anyhow, please do stop by and pick up one of these. I see a few people do have them already. You'll probably find it very helpful. So let me get out of the way, and you can start the keynote.
So it's time for the keynote now. I would like to invite on stage CE Society President Dr. Wahab to kindly introduce our keynote speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sinota. I would like to invite our keynote speaker for this conference, Mr. Jim Slivetsky. And I'm happy that Jim is here. Jim came from Edmonton, Alberta, of course, Canada. So Jim is going to talk about the pollution of hyperconnectivity and the challenges of consumer electronic devices. Jim is the Director of Technology Innovation at TELUS, leading team of senior engineers and principal technology architects focused on identifying and evaluating disruptive service and technology opportunities. Jim has extensive integrated experience in telecom technology, development, analysis, and management. Jim has been involved in several cooperation research initiatives at TELUS, and in fact started exploring the domain of artificial intelligence 20 years ago. We are talking about the artificial intelligence today, but Jim started 20 years ago. He holds a patent of Ring Builder, a machine learning based optical network design tool developed at TELUS in conjunction with telecommunication research laboratories. Jim started his career in application-specific integrated circuit design at Northern Telecom Research. TELUS has had many, and at TELUS has had many roles ranging from voice network switching services to many several other items. And by the way, Jim is also a member of Consumer Electronics Society. I would like to invite our keynote speakers. Jim, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thanks. Good morning, everybody. I think I'm going to have Wahab write my resume up going forward here, so thank you for the introduction. Brahim Gideon, who was supposed to be our CTO at TELUS, unfortunately got pulled away on an urgent corporate issue, and so he gives his apologies to the conference attendees for that. Brahim asked me to pitch hit for him this week, and it was very nice of him to do it, and I appreciate the opportunity. However, he said, Jim, you're going to give a talk on the pollution of hyperconnectivity and the challenges of consumer electronic devices. And I basically said, what? And it actually took a bit of single malt beverage with high alcohol content for me to sit and think about this for a while to exactly interpret what exactly that title meant. And in thinking about it, I actually decomposed it into, is the current Internet of Things rollout optimal for what we're trying to do to help our customers? And does every device an individual owns need to be connected to the Internet? And further, will this connectivity paradigm actually create meaning, or does it actually become the source of the pollution, the title of the presentation? Again, upon further reflection, and I've been in Las Vegas this week to see the entire conference. I think that where I've concluded is that connectivity should make society's life better, easier, more convenient, and less expensive. And I think that, I don't know if anybody in the room saw the LG corporate keynote right at the beginning of the conference, but Dr. I.P. Park actually put it in very concise and precise terms. Does the technology that we're applying actually make your life better? And if it doesn't make your life better, should you actually be doing it? And I think that that sort of gets to the root of the whole idea of where we're headed with respect to big data, completely connected device ecosystems, and the proliferation of data that we're going to have to be dealing with, especially in the 5G era. I think society as a whole has to really take a look at that from a technology adoption perspective and see where the puts and takes are in terms of where we're improving life for end users, consumers, people, and where we're not. And I think that in 2019, the answer to that is, I think we are, but I think it's kind of a partial yes with respect to IoT and connected environments, but I think that there's a lot more that we can do. And that's what I'm going to talk about with you today. I think, again, decomposing the topic of the keynote, it can be classified, I think, into 6 main building blocks that we have to address and analyze in determining optimality, if you will, of connected ecosystems, heterogeneous environments, etc. And I think it gets to connectivity. I'm from a telecommunications provider, obviously, so that's sort of important for us and important for the ecosystem development. Obviously, the consumer devices that are being connected and the heterogeneous device ecosystems that are being formed organically as consumer products get introduced into industry. Clearly, and especially with 5G, coincident with that is actually the application of artificial intelligence, right? Artificial intelligence, and again, machine learning is absolutely critical to improve the efficiency, especially when you're dealing with big data-based applications. And as well, I think that the end state is actually something of a form of an ambient intelligence environment, right? We actually want to lower the friction of utilization of capability that we're providing via IoT devices. And actually, an end state would be no user input, but user benefit. And I guess most importantly, and this is actually one of the reasons Brahim isn't here today, end-to-end security is absolutely foundational and imperative and integral to whatever is going forward. I'm on the title page. Obviously that single malt whiskey I had this week probably had a little bit too much impact on me here. So in this presentation, I'm going to talk about connectivity, the consumer ecosystems that are present today and how they're evolving. I'm going to talk about the reality of that combination of networking and consumer electronics ecosystems. And finally, I'm going to give some recommendations of what I think needs to be done in order to get a clear path forward and actually improve things for the customer, actually exploit technology that is of customer or personal benefit. So, connectivity. I come from the 2nd largest telecommunications company in Canada. We're a regional ILEC or wireline company. We're a national wireless company. As a wireless organization, we're very proud. In our 4G network, for 2 years running, we've won 4 major awards for the quality, speed, and experience of our wireless network. So clearly, Our core business is connecting people, devices, and things in order to facilitate commerce, information, communications, and entertainment. We are not unique. We're very proud of what we're doing at TELUS. But across the span, at least in the West, most Western nations have a great deal of connectivity today. In the consumer space, it is not unheard of, and it's actually quite common to get 200 megabit per second connectivity, and often symmetric or near symmetric connectivity at that rate. And it's very interesting, right? Because wireless and wireline connectivity is actually merging. And as we get into the 5G world, I believe that the actual connectivity mechanism will be deprecated, and you won't worry about whether or not you're fiber connected, VDSL connected, or even 5G connected. It's just a case of being connected and having access to data as you need it. The interesting thing for me, and certainly in the last 15 years in our company, we were one of the first to do media services in the form of IPTV in the early 2000s. And it's kind of amusing to look at it today because in 2003, we ran one of the first IPTV systems in North America. AT&T was another one, where the actual connectivity link to the home was a massive 7 megabits per second down and 1 megabit per second up. Laughable by today's constraint. We did it because we enforced strict deterministic quality of service, right? The resources to the home were weak, and so therefore we had to be extremely smart and efficient of the allocation of those resources. Another note about that is that at that time, we also launched a cloud-based service, a security camera service. And I still remember today that the security camera service on top of the IPTV service would completely saturate that communications link to the home. So absolutely, we were at the boundary of the ability to deliver the service at the time. Obviously, VDSL2 has come on the wireline side. GPON, our company is halfway through a generational project of converting our wireline access technology into a fiber to the home-based solution. Bandwidth is not a concern for us. Going forward, of course, we have LTE today on a national basis. 5G spectrum auctions are occurring in Canada over the next 36 months, and that's going to change the landscape yet again. Earlier this week, at a Verizon keynote at CES, there was a demonstration of the Verizon standard 5G to the home connectivity solution. And the gentleman that they were interviewing in real time was getting on the order of 1.4 gigabits per second downlink to his house via a pre-standard 5G connectivity solution. All this to say that quality of service has certainly gone by the wayside with respect to the types of services and the types of devices being connected to the home, because of the fact that the resource that is connecting these devices is so vast that there really aren't any constraints on that. Having said that, I think the other thing that is changing is that in the 5G world, I think you're still going to get back to a resource-constrained environment. Yes, 1,000 times more devices being able to be connected. Peak bandwidths of up to 10 gigabits per second. In total, 8 different dimensions that show the viability or the disruptive nature of 5G connectivity. I would still suggest that we're going to end up in a resource loss situation with that. And so therefore, I believe going forward, while we worry only about quality of experience rather than quality of service today, quality of service again is going to become important going forward. And Green really likes talking about this. We are the only utility, because we are a utility company in part, where the commodity that we sell monotonically decreases in price with time. And that is quite critical because, especially in the mobile side, and especially with the onboarding of 5G technologies, we're actually getting price per bit price performance that is sort of exceeding sort of a Moore's Law equivalent in terms of improvement, with our incoming revenue actually remaining flat in time. And so it's a very, very difficult engineering problem from a carrier perspective, but it's a very, very rich time from a consumer experience perspective. Okay, from the consumer perspective, ecosystems, right? IoT devices, we're very familiar with the proliferation, and if you go out onto the show floor, virtually 25% of the booths in these halls have people with toques on because they're Google. And likewise, a similar number of booths have Alexa enabled, right? And so consumer ecosystems are present, for sure. I think one of the main issues, though, is that they are stovepipe closed solutions. Today, still, you pick a Google solution, you pick an Amazon solution, you pick a Microsoft solution, and you tend to stick with it. It is interesting that, ironically, the voice assistants at the top end of the stack, the new paradigm of user interface for the customer, tends to hide and abstract that, but nonetheless, you have differing ecosystems. I think that sort of fragmentation is one of those pain points that needs to be addressed, and we'll talk about that a bit later. Clearly as well, security of the ecosystem is a critical component in sort of that evolution, and will become even more critical as the bandwidth cross-sections enabling connectivity to the cloud of these devices continues. If we take a user-centric rather than a technology-centric view, today, one user interacts daily with multiple networks. Everybody has a cell phone, or two or three. Many people, it's getting to be ubiquity, have personal wearable devices that are part of the personal area network. Coming again, though there was a lot of hype about it in the past, augmented reality, other forms of visual enhancement are coming online, and certainly we as a company are actually using that kind of technology going forward with our customer service delivery people in order to help them with the vast complexity of the ecosystems that they have to deal with day to day. Now, I have to talk to our corporate communications people because a smart car just drove over the human there, and I apologize for that. But on top of all of this, we are now getting into various domains of connected car implementations. Hotspots at the lowest level, even before that, telematics for vehicle servicing and maintenance. That comes on board in addition to that. And it's interesting because that domain today changes the persona or the user experience. You might have a particular ecosystem that you're using with your personal area network, with your phone, with your tablet and stuff. The minute you get into that car today, it becomes the master. That is the, if you will, the persona that you have to adapt to. On the show floor here, there are several companies looking at that and actually trying to invert that paradigm and actually making the user interfaces on the smart vehicles match the persona of the user. Sort of a very interesting twist. I don't know quite how it'll play out, but it is definitely a customer-centric view. obviously, we're sort of at the tipping point of the era of connected vehicles beyond sort of the hotspot domain. DSRC, 5G, next generation V2V communications, obviously are going to be very important, both in the pre-autonomous vehicle domain and in the autonomous vehicle domain. One of the problems, however, is that for the foreseeable future, certainly in my lifetime, you're going to have a heterogeneous environment. Non-connected vehicles like I use, semi-connected vehicles, semi-autonomous vehicles, autonomous vehicles. Again, a problem of heterogeneity and lack of communication. Just like consumer ecosystems, vehicle ecosystems. Certainly, as I've described, right, the hybridization of different capabilities and the ability to communicate with these vehicles with different capabilities is a critical thing from a safety perspective, and actually is one of the prime drivers for a lot of the activities in smart cities we're going on today. Beyond the human with the multiple networks, beyond the multiple networks with the vehicle, of course, multiple networks in the home on top of all of this. Significantly, those multiple networks today very rarely interwork and remain another element of heterogeneity that enfranchises the ability to actually take an aggregate view of a person, the context of the person, and the state of their environment in order to begin to get insights with respect to how to improve things with respect to IoT, and of course, with respect to being able to help them via AI. Given that plethora of environments, networks, services capabilities, all of them striving to become more intelligent, a major problem sets in of reality. Every one of those vertical systems is effectively attempting to be a problem solver for the consumer. The problem is they are being problem solving for the particular function that they're purpose built for. And unfortunately, because these systems aren't truly orthogonal, you have the issue that you have systems that could interfere with one another, systems that can prevent functionality from achieving what the design intent was, etc. And that's certainly the case, like even in the home automation domain. A combination of Zigbee or Z-Wave, at least the original version of Z-Wave, as well as, say, Wi-Fi automation, did not interwork very well. There are products today that help that, but on top of all of that, as I said, security is a very important issue. On top of all of that, security and management of those devices has become a problem and continues to be a problem. Today, there's very little allowance for coordinated software upgrades, and that could be disastrous, I guess. So the device ecosystem and its functionality, the connectivity regime, and then, of course, as you head towards identity and authentication of the devices and the systems, you have yet another dimension that is heterogeneous and is something that is ripe for coordination across the domains. And for instance, Facebook is very often used as an identity integrator, even for some of the services that we sell, and certainly services that our customers use for sure. Again, I'm not quite certain that I really want Facebook to be the trusted agent for that, but a lot of our consumers use it. I think the reality of the situation is that in net, there are half a dozen potential methodologies for providing authentication, verification of context, and providing integrity They're not going to disappear, but one of the things that we can work towards is getting some sort of brokering environment, some sort of abstraction environment, such that we can interwork. And I think that that is extremely critical. I think that from that perspective, just taking a look here, consumer electronics companies need to monetize the innovation. And that's where the heterogeneity comes from. And hence, that differentiation is what keeps us in business. If you go back to the old telephony world with circuit switch telephony, there was interworking between different families of circuit switches. But the actual key monetization capability was always from unique or heterogeneous features, never across platforms, at least in the early days. I think that as well, if you actually take a look at other sectors other than IoT, and certainly for us, broadband access and broadband access devices is one, that we manage systems that are heterogeneous. Things like TR69 and that kind of device management allows for us to have commonality of control across a heterogeneous environment with differentiation with vendor extensions still being allowed. And I think that that is potentially a way that can be looked at, I think, in terms of the IoT domain, in terms of smart devices. My last comment about this is that if you actually take a look at an average Canadian home, there's over 30 devices, active devices present in terms of IoT or smart devices today. And ironically, still the center of the household, the television, is very rarely integral to those various ecosystems. And I think that is potentially a miss from the consumer electronics manufacturers. I know that LG and Samsung tried to enforce ecosystems to actually exploit that device capability over the last 10 years. They have not been able to integrate very well until recently with the ecosystems that have been of customer choice, being Apple, Google, and Microsoft. That is changing, for sure. So, as I've said, multiple disparate ecosystems exist, and they aren't going to disappear, but how are we going to get them to interwork? Today, in the connected vehicle domain, a General Motors vehicle doesn't communicate with a Tesla vehicle. BMW vehicles will be communicating with Audi and Mercedes-Benz vehicles, obviously because of regulatory stuff in their own home market territories. But largely across the ecosystems in the home, to the ecosystems on the personal area network, to the ecosystems in the cars, these remain diverse. And how do we get some sort of benefit, some sort of aggregate benefit for the consumer? Certainly, you ideally would want to have a situation where you have a central ability to do things to make life easier for you, for the end user, right? You'd want to automatically, when you drive out with your smart car, you would like to have the residence turn down its power consumption, secure itself, and be ready for no occupancy. You'd like to be able to resubscribe to maybe your vehicle registration subscription, maybe your newspaper subscription if you still have newspapers, and have that done automatically for you. And also, you'd like to be able to create and fulfill even things like grocery stuff, given the fact that contextually maybe you're heading towards a grocery store, and potentially there is an opportunity for you to make use of somebody actually picking all of the goods you need as you approach the area, the store in your vehicle. All of these things require some sort collaborative information store across these disparate ecosystems. Right? I think the most obvious approach to that is to try to take a look at a coordinated view of open APIs. Most of the ecosystems on the left today offer some form of open API, but as I suggested in my circuit switched example, the issue turns into one of what capability is exposed to be able to interwork with other systems versus what capability remains as part of a discrete capability for a customer. So, given that there are multiple identities, multiple authentications, proprietary interfaces, and security concerns, what is the pathway to rationalizing this? I think the time is to rally around a coordinated set of APIs, at least a minimum message set form of APIs across the ecosystems in order to facilitate a baseline level of interworking. I think we should actually reward openness of interworking in terms of providing additional capability for the vendors that choose to do that approach. And I think all of this gets down to being able to make things frictionless, but actually we really, as a carrier, we really want to be able to make that connectivity story much more friendly. Our company moniker is TELUS is feature friendly, but actually make it seamless so the customer does not have to make overt decisions with respect to connectivity requirements depending on the context or location or time or device that they might be using or application. I think that combined with an identity management solution that embraces or encompasses those in use by customers today, but if you will, is a superposition of those such that we can exchange information across ecosystems is critically important. For instance, my Apple phone can detect my face quite well. Unfortunately, my Google Chromebook can't, right? That sort of context information from an AI perspective is not shared today. And I think that the other point sort of gets back to a telco approach to delivering a solution and improving the quality of the technology for the users. And that is a unified and tested way to do device management across these ecosystems. It's absolutely critical, especially with cybersecurity threats as they are occurring and continue to occur and accelerate, to be able to, in an agile manner, be able to address devices and elements across ecosystems in order to quell threats, diminish attack vector points, etc. Today, with the ecosystems as they are, and with the operations people being generally end consumers, that is very difficult to impossible. We can't stop customers from inadvertently clicking on phishing attempts or getting false firmware upgrades. All of that depends on a higher level of security. And for us, as a carrier, obviously we're relying from our legacy in wireless communications on embedded SIM technology and physical SIM technology, but other forms of hardware root of trust actually play into that. And I think that getting to a device management capability such that you can take bad actors out, you can enforce coordinated firmware updates across fleets, across different device ecosystems is critically important. So, what can we do? As I started today, I don't think every device needs to emit data. And again, it was very interesting as Verizon talked about 5G capabilities. There was a a very interesting statement about being able to handle 1,000 times more devices per unit area in coverage, and also being able to handle orders of magnitude more data from each one of these devices. And the hypothesis that was put forward was, this is great. If we can collect a terabyte of data per consumer device, just imagine what sort of inferences and AI conclusions we can get to. I think that actually gets back to the original statement. That is data pollution. And I think that as a result, we really have to consider that not every device needs to emit data. This leads to literally a new generation of garbage in, garbage out. I think standard processes and device models are going to help limit the amount of data attached to a customer. And I think that this is actually a very important thing from a privacy, security, and integrity perspective. We should only be storing data about a customer that is absolutely needed, and it should only be persistent for as long as it's needed. It should not be stored in repositories, like many of the cyber threats that have occurred here in North America and around the world with respect to data that had been cached or stored that was no longer needed. I think, given that as well, security from the ground up, and at TELUS, all of our systems and services go through a regime called Design for Security. It is absolutely critical. That is foundational to this, and whether it's as simple tools as preventing trivial password generation or no password use in a lot of automation devices that we actually see in our network today, all the way up to using key exchange, PKI infrastructures, hardware root of trust, to ensure the integrity of both the communications link, as well as the application, as well as the user, and as well as the user context. That is important in a hyper-connected world. And I think getting back to the statement from the CEO of LG, I think that as we design things, as we standardize environments, and as we build new capabilities for our customers, we have to continuously ask ourselves, is this actually making life better for the intended consumer or not? And if it's not making life better for the consumer, frictionless, more capability, ease of life, we shouldn't be doing it. So, in conclusion, we have to enforce secure by design. That is literally job one in this world. We do have to protect consumers from themselves, and that involves security for sure, but it also involves that whole idea of having a unit to be able to manage a fleet of devices and capabilities for the consumer. And then lastly, I think from an industry perspective, we really have to work hard. In the previous discussion in this room, they talked about the interworking of academia, industry, and government. I think providing a level playing field is absolutely healthy, and it is absolutely the most efficient way for us to be able to allow multiple entrants, multiple innovations, but in a domain where security and customer perspective is first and foremost. With that, I'll conclude, and if there are any questions in the remaining couple of minutes, I'd be glad to take them.
From your description of 5G, it sounds like you're making the network very intelligent and having big promises. And this sounds a lot like SS7, except doubling down on it. And when you guarantee capacity, you create scarcity by setting resources aside.
Okay, yeah, actually a very good comment. The SS7 infrastructure was robust by design through static routing and deterministic over provisioning of capability to allow multiple fault tolerance, but centralized. In the 5G context, as we move forward, the drive is actually going away from cloud to effectively a fog environment, right? Where the control plane is actually going to be distributed very widely throughout the network for a couple of reasons. Edge computing will enable the low latency capabilities that are being proposed by 5G, right? 4 millisecond round trip time is a pretty good party trick in a network. But as well, that distribution of the control plane intelligence is also intended to be very dynamic and very agile, resilient. So I would suggest that those are
We'll talk later.
okay, we'll take that one offline.
Other questions, comments? Got a couple more minutes left? Sorry. No? Come on. Wake up, everybody. Everybody's on different time zones here. So you mentioned the different ecosystem problem. Let me posit something that's kind of related to that. It's a difference in the lifetime between how long the consumer wants to have that doorbell in the front of their house and how long the company that's providing the cloud service for it is interested in being in there. How many technology orphans do we kind of all have that we brought into some ecosystem and then somebody pulled the rug out from underneath us and now we've got, things that are basically doorstops.
We are living that every day at TELUS across just our media services. We run the legacy IPTV platform that I said started in a very constrained bandwidth environment world. I don't know if I should be saying this publicly, but the client devices in that world are obsolete by 10 years. They exist in a Windows CE 5.0 butchered world, and they exist without being compromised actually because of the security wrapper around them. The interesting thing is that those devices aren't going to be orphaned until that TV service streams down. As you look at the next generation service, the more hyper-connected one, if you will, we've gone to an Android basis. And Android's really cool. Users like Play Store. They like the additional capabilities that Google provides. We actually like that environment because Google does a whole bunch of the security work that traditionally would be internal to our company. But the big minus, I tell you, 3-year-old box, can't do Android P, you're done, bunt, right? And this is continuing to be a growing issue for us because consumers, once they buy something, they figure it's going to last forever and it becomes a security threat.
Thank you, Jim. We know now what the 5G is carrying, and software-defined network, virtualizations, and this is all elements to improve the security itself and to take the management in whole. So how do you differentiate between the security for the whole entire system network versus devices on the consumer? Thank you.
So that is evolving in our company. Certainly as we've gone to software-defined networking and have implemented the beginnings of network function virtualization, we've used traditional approaches to protecting those environments, and it's multiple firewalls and multiple gateways. We understand now, and this is actually as a result of the hyperconnectivity domain, that you actually have to change your thinking to assume that you've got an insecure environment and you have to work around that. That you actually have to operate in what you have to consider to be a compromised environment and continue in that basis. That is why encryption, making use of PKI infrastructures, etc., is critically important. In terms of the device management, whether it's in the core network or at the edge, it's very interesting. The whole idea of a maintenance window in the traditional telco, where service operations were done in a particular time window, and the networks were actually turned down in order to prevent threats, and that includes control plane stuff like the signaling network. That sort of thinking is actually migrated, I'd say in the last 10 years, into the consumer domain, and certainly in the IPTV domain itself. there are now maintenance windows on consumer equipment, which is very interesting because consumers don't have maintenance windows themselves. And I experienced it actually just before coming to Las Vegas. My eldest son is in fourth year computer engineering and started his new school term. And just before I left, I was having Wi-Fi problems. And so I'm a Luddite. I have an ancient Apple Airport Extreme that has been running my entire network. And I put it over the edge over Christmas because I took all of my original first generation Z-Wave stuff because it's insecure, and I replaced it with Wi-Fi networking. That took that gateway down. Great. Everybody's watching Netflix, Prime, looking at the internet. I figure, okay, everybody's out of the house. I'll use that as my maintenance window, and I'll take down my old airport and put in a new mesh, TELUS mesh Wi-Fi infrastructure. I got about 2/3 through that. My son came home, said, Daddy, the internet's down, I can't do my work. I had to reverse everything out of there, right? And so this is where I believe that the methodologies, the discipline of how core networks are managed actually is going to have to migrate into the consumer domain, hopefully in an automated manner. I don't want people to do maintenance windows at home.
We've got time for one more question.
Okay, I have a question that right now the cybersecurity is so severe, and also all the company want to have the private data, like Intel, we want to protect our property.
Yes.
Then, but that's contradict to to simplify all the security. So is there any open form or some kind of security system or in your company? How do you keep the security and also make the level of security become easier for the high speed, so reduce the level of security? I mean, so like I know in AT&T used to build up the private network, private line for bank, but that will make the system become more complicated in the world. So how will, is there any solution, or there are some work like the Linux is open form structure can be used?
So there's a bundle of questions in what you just asked. I think at the root, being very rigorous about what customer state information you keep and what network state information you make available is sort of a first step in there. I think though that as you get to this plethora of devices, your home has over 30 connected devices today, it'll probably be 100 connected devices, if not more, in 5 years. That sort of domain is actually going to require, I think, a bunch of work, potentially in something like a distributed ledger approach to provide authentication and security in a distributed manner so that you don't have a single point that you could attack as a threat is actuated. But beyond that, maybe we could take it offline because I think there's a whole bunch of stuff in terms of what is being done in the core network today. I didn't get into it. Open source software was absolutely verboten in our company 15 years ago. Open source software powers the majority of the virtualized capability today in our organization.
Thank you, Jim. It was a wonderful, inspiring talk.
Thank you. Have a good rest of CES, and I hope you have a great conference.
May I please invite the CES Society President on the stage to express a token of appreciation for keynote speaker.